NASA just made it official. Artemis 2 launches February 6, 2026. Astronauts returning to the moon after 50 years. But there's a critical problem. Orion's heat shield failed in over 100 spots during Artemis 1, cracking apart at 25,000 miles per hour. NASA investigated for 2 years, then chose not to fix it, just changing the flight path instead. Will that be enough to keep astronauts safe? And why is SpaceX Starship suddenly NASA's backup plan? Let's dive right in. When Artemis 1 splashed down in November 2022, NASA celebrated. The mission was perfect, they said. Orion circled the moon and came home safely. But inside the recovery facility, engineers discovered something that should terrify anyone planning to fly on this spacecraft. The heat shield had failed in over 100 locations. Material that was supposed to ablate smoothly had cracked and broken off in chunks, exposing the structure underneath. This wasn't cosmetic damage. At re-entry, Orion hits the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour while enduring temperatures of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat shield is literally the only thing keeping astronauts from burning alive, and it catastrophically failed with nobody on board. NASA spent 2 full years investigating what went wrong. They traced the problem to gas buildup inside the avcoat material during what's called a skip entry, where the capsule dips into the atmosphere, bounces back up, then dips again. Gases get trapped under the surface because NASA had made the material denser to improve manufacturing inspections. Better quality control created a fatal flaw. The pressure built up underneath and cracked the material apart like a bomb going off. So NASA faced a choice: redesign the heat shield completely, which would take years and cost billions, or keep the flawed design and just change the re-entry trajectory to generate less heat. They chose the trajectory change. They're betting 4 astronauts' lives that flying a different angle will prevent the same failure that destroyed the test shield. No fundamental fix, no redesign, just hope that a flight path adjustment is enough. This decision also cut launch opportunities in half because the new trajectory is more restrictive. Does that sound like confidence to you or desperation? The heat shield problem is serious, but it's actually not the biggest threat to Artemis. The real killer is economics, and the numbers are absolutely brutal. According to NASA's Inspector General, each SLS launch costs $4.1 billion just for the rocket and ground operations. Add Orion for another billion. That's $5.1 billion per mission. Through 2025, the Artemis program has consumed $93 billion. That money bought exactly 1 unmanned test flight and is now paying for 1 crewed orbital mission. No landing, no moon base, no permanent infrastructure, just proving that humans can reach lunar orbit using hardware that costs more than some nations' entire GDP. What makes this truly unsustainable is that SLS is completely expendable. Every component gets thrown away after 1 use. Those 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage each cost over $100 million. They're refurbished space shuttle engines that burn for 8 minutes, then fall into the Pacific Ocean and disappear forever. The solid rocket boosters splash down but require such extensive refurbishment that calling them reusable is misleading. Even the European-built service module gets jettisoned before re-entry. This isn't a rocket. It's an incinerator that burns billions of dollars for a single flight. The economics get worse when you consider what's actually needed. If NASA wants 6 missions per year to support a lunar base, that's over $30 billion annually just for launches. Congress appropriates about $25 billion for NASA's entire budget. The program costs more than the agency receives. There's no path forward. SLS cannot sustain any meaningful lunar presence because the cost per flight makes regular operations mathematically impossible. This is where SpaceX's approach becomes impossible to ignore. Starship's total development cost is estimated between $2.5 and $5 billion. That includes the entire vehicle, super heavy booster, launch infrastructure at Starbase, and all testing. That's less than what NASA spent just developing SLS, and once operational, Starship's projected launch cost is between $10 and $100 million per flight. Even at the absolute high end, that's 40 times cheaper than SLS. This isn't an incremental improvement. This is a complete revolution in economics. The difference comes down to reusability. Falcon 9 first stages routinely fly 15 to 20 missions, with some exceeding 25 flights. That's why SpaceX can charge $60 million commercially and still profit. The hardware costs get spread across dozens of launches. SLS will never achieve this because the architecture is fundamentally expendable. There's no upgrade path to reusability. The system is locked into burning billions per flight forever. But cost is only one advantage. Capability matters just as much, and here the gap becomes even more dramatic. Current SLS can deliver 27 metric tons to lunar orbit. Future variants might reach 38 to 45 tons, but those upgrades are unfunded and years away. Starship, with orbital refueling, can deliver over 100 metric tons to the moon. That's not just better, it's the difference between transporting a capsule and transporting entire habitats. Flight rate exposes another constraint. SLS might launch once per year, maybe twice if everything aligns perfectly. There are only 16 RS-25 engines in inventory, all left over from the shuttle era. New production costs over $100 million per engine. Solid rocket segments take 12 to 18 months to build. You cannot scale this system. SpaceX already launches Falcon 9 over 100 times annually. Starship uses the same manufacturing philosophy, meaning multiple flights per week becomes realistic once the system matures. This brings us to an uncomfortable reality. NASA has spent $93 billion developing SLS and Orion, and Artemis 2 will prove these systems work in February 2026. But for Artemis 3, the actual moon landing, NASA awarded SpaceX a $2.9 billion contract for Starship as the lunar lander. Think about what this arrangement means. NASA pays $4.1 billion to launch SLS, which delivers Orion to lunar orbit. Then Starship does the hard work, landing on the surface, providing life support, and launching back to orbit. Orion just waits overhead like an expensive taxi, then brings the crew home. This makes sense today, given available hardware, but the logic collapses long-term. If Starship can land on the moon, it can also launch crews from Earth. The capabilities overlap substantially. Once Starship demonstrates orbital refueling and crew rating over the next 2 years, there's no technical reason to use SLS anymore. Crews could launch on Starship, refuel in orbit, fly to the moon, land, and return all on one system that costs a fraction per flight and flies far more often. NASA has committed to SLS through roughly 2030, with Artemis missions 3 through 5 already funded. After that, decisions will depend on demonstrated capabilities and budget realities. If Starship proves itself, and all testing suggests it will, the case for continuing SLS becomes impossible to defend. Even with political pressure and jobs in key states, spending $4 billion per launch when a $100 million alternative exists cannot be justified forever. So here's what we're really watching. Artemis 2 launches in February with a heat shield NASA chose not to fix, betting that a trajectory change is enough. 4 astronauts will trust their lives to that decision. Meanwhile, the entire program burns through billions at a rate that makes long-term lunar presence impossible. The math is simple and brutal. SLS costs $4 billion per flight and flies once a year. Starship costs up to $100 million per flight and will eventually fly multiple times per week. One system delivers 27 tons, the other delivers over 100 tons. One is expendable, the other is fully reusable. NASA already knows this. That's why they hired SpaceX to build the lunar lander for Artemis 3. Once Starship proves it can safely transport crews, land on the moon, and return, the question becomes unavoidable. Why spend $4 billion on SLS when Starship can do everything for a fraction of the cost? The political answer might keep SLS alive a few more years, but economics always wins eventually. We're witnessing the end of one era and the birth of another. The system that costs billions will be replaced by the system that costs millions. That's not speculation, that's inevitability. What do you think? Will NASA cancel SLS after 2030? Or will politics keep it alive despite the cost? Drop your thoughts below. If this analysis opened your eyes to what's really happening with Artemis, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to see it. And subscribe to Space Update 24 Hours because we're tracking every development as this story unfolds. Thanks for watching.